Before we get going with the interview, I want to offer you a free ebook from Corporate Alliance about becoming more referable. Basically, it's along the lines that everybody knows word of mouth is the best form of advertising, but that there's a secret to get people to refer more business to you, and that most of us are making it unintentionally too hard for contacts to help us. So what this resource goes through is this idea of how to become 10 times more referable. You can get it for free on their website. If you go to corporatealliance.net/ebooks, you can download it for free. Again, corporatealliance.net/ebooks. Welcome to Leadership and People. This is a series that pulls back the curtain on leadership by interviewing CEOs, senior executives, and entrepreneurs who've had large exits. We ask these experts about how they built trusted networks to rapidly grow their companies and what advice they wish they knew if they could do it all again. Today on the show, we've got Rob Brough.
A long rope, and give them the opportunity to succeed and to find themselves and to see within themselves their ability to do things that maybe they didn't realize they could do, and give them the opportunity to fail. And so what I have tried to do as well is that, when they fail, I don't punish them. I'm not harsh in that.
Rob, thanks for making time.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jess.
So tell us what you do for Zions.
So I am the Executive Vice President of Marketing and Communications, which in essence means that I have responsibility for all of the advertising, internal, external communications, community relations, sponsorships, community partnerships, our website, what we call the Office of the President, all that sort of funnels into my group. So basically what we say is any communication that comes from the bank, whether it's internal or external, comes out of our team.
Yeah. And so for people who may not know, or people across the country that might be listening to this, can you give us a scope of how many locations, assets under management, anything to give people a scope of the size?
Absolutely. So Zions Bank is under the umbrella of Zions Bank Corporation. That is our parent company. Zions Bank itself operates in Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. We have about 130 branches spread across those three states. Been around since 1873, so we've been around for 145 years. We're the largest locally headquartered financial institution, we're headquartered in Salt Lake City. So asset size about $16 to $17 billion in assets. So we're a pretty good sized organization.
Yeah. About how many staff approximately?
About 2,500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's dive right into it. The show about leadership and people. We were talking just for a minute about one of the leaders that's influenced you.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe share a bit of that?
Yeah. Well, it may be too obvious, but my mentor when it comes to leadership is Scott Anderson. He's the president and CEO of Zions Bank, and to me, he embodies what leadership is all about. And I've had the privilege I've been here at Zions for just over 21 years, and I've worked directly for Scott for about 18 of those years, but worked with Scott for all 21 of those years. And so he really has been and continues to be my mentor when it comes to leadership.
And do you have any stories? Is there an example that comes to mind of a classic Scott Anderson story for you, or something that maybe either something with you or something about him, or just something that can give people some flavor for that?
Well, I think one of the things about Scott is I think, which would be maybe sort of atypical for a CEO, he's just so nice, and I'm not saying that CEOs aren't nice, because they are. I know a lot of fabulous CEOs who are incredibly nice, but Scott has a compassion, and he has a love for the community. He has a love for the individual, and maybe not so much a specific example, but I see it. I saw it very early on for me. And maybe I could give you this example that was very personal to me. That when I'd been here at Zions Bank for about a little under 2 years. So this was my second job out of college. I'd been with a local communications and PR firm for a couple of years, which was a fabulous experience for me. And then I made the move and came over here to Zions Bank, and that's a whole other story in and of itself. If you want to talk about it, we can. But I'd been here for a little less than 2 years, and I made the decision to go somewhere else. I had another company that recruited me. I was flattered by that. I was flattered that someone was interested in me and came to me and said, we'd love to have you come work for us. And they were offering what at the time seemed like a lot of money. And so I took it. And frankly, I didn't really think about it probably as thoroughly as I should have. And I left Zions and I went to this other organization, and I'd been there for just a very short time. I mean, a couple of weeks, and I just realized, gosh, I think I may have blown it. I may have made a mistake. And this was a fabulous company. It's a company that I respect greatly, but it just wasn't a fit for me. And so I called my former boss at that time, and I said, look, I think I may have made a mistake. Is there any chance you'd take me back? And he said, well, I wish you would have called me a couple of days ago, but he said, we actually just made an offer to someone to take your position. And I said, great, I understand. I certainly didn't expect for you to hold on to my job in case I decided I wanted to come back. And so I just resigned myself to the fact that, okay, we're going to make this work. Well, a couple of days later, I got a call from Scott Anderson. And again, at this time, I had worked with Scott for a little less than 2 years, but I was a relatively junior person here at the bank at the time, but I get this call from Scott, and he says, I understand that you may be interested in coming back to Zions Bank. And I said, oh, Scott, I was sort of embarrassed, that he was calling, and I said, yeah, Scott, I just feel like I maybe made a hasty decision and didn't think it through well enough, but I would be thrilled to come back. And he says, look, we would love to have you come back and work for Zions. And, we'll create this position for you, and here's what we'll have you do. And to me, one, I'll be forever grateful to Scott for that. And I am, to this day, I remember that story almost every day. But what it taught me from a leadership standpoint is, that Scott saw something in me that I didn't see in me, and he created a pathway and an opportunity for me to leverage what he saw in me, and I've tried to do that, and he continues to do that, where he gives me plenty of rope, which can be good and bad. He gives me the opportunity to be successful. He gives me the opportunity to build confidence in myself and my abilities. He's always done that, but he also has given me the latitude to fail, which I've learned a great deal from as well. So,
yeah. So thinking about that lesson and kind of learning from that example, what are some of the ways that you've tried to implement that, or what does that look like for your team?
Well, a few things I would mention. One is that my philosophy is that I try to hire really good people and then let them do their jobs. And so, but I also think that within that there's a responsibility that we have, not just even those who you again give a long rope to. There's still opportunity for coaching and mentoring, and so what I've tried to do is just what Scott's done for me, is give my employees a long rope and give them the opportunity to succeed and to find themselves and to see within themselves their ability to do things that maybe they didn't realize they could do, and give them the opportunity to fail. And so what I have tried to do as well is that, when they fail, I don't punish them. I'm not harsh in that, because I think that each of us, we're all going to fail, and we're going to fail over and over again. But if we have a fear of failure, I think we limit ourselves. And so I've tried to emulate what Scott taught me by giving my employees that same leash, while at the same time trying to give them guidance and direction that they need as well.
Well, I want to talk about this. So our consulting firm, Mylan, we work with all these different CEOs and commanding generals and blah, 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 right? And a lot of times we'll be working with somebody who's realizing, hey, we our culture maybe isn't as daring as they could be, isn't as bold as they could be. There's a little bit of CYA, kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so, this idea of let people fail, it's kind of scary.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if you were to give guidance to some other senior leaders who are saying, hey, we want to open up this a little bit, what guidance would you give about how to know, what are the left and right limits? How do we let them know, hey, this amount of failure is reasonable?
Acceptable.
Because a free-for-all doesn't work.
No.
Holding the reins too tight doesn't work. Walking that balance beam in the middle, what kind of guidance would you have for somebody?
Well, and I wouldn't hold myself out as an expert on this by any stretch, but I have seen what Scott's done, and I've tried to implement it. Obviously, within our industry, we're in the banking business, highly regulated, and so there are some pretty hard and fast do's and don'ts, and so there are some failures that are just not acceptable at all. And so I think part of this process is clearly understanding what are those areas, what are those places where, to quote the famous line, where failure is not an option, where there's a certain limit. So we operate within that realm in terms of the regulatory environment that we're in, and so we understand where those guardrails are within which, if we go beyond those guardrails, failure isn't an option. So I think that is one thing, is clearly understanding that and making sure that that's clearly known, making sure that as you try to create this environment where failure is accepted, but it's not a free for all. You set those parameters and say, okay, we can't walk on this ground, and so. But then I think, what I would say is, as you create that environment where failure is accepted, what you have to allow for in that is that when someone does fail, that there's a culture where you can have that conversation with them about, okay, we failed here, but let's have a conversation about why we failed. Let's have a conversation about how we then improve the process going forward to ensure that failure doesn't replicate. And so that's not just a willy-nilly, hey, you know what, do what you want, and if you fail, there's no repercussions for it. Well, I'm not going to fire you for failure unless it's in some of these other areas where it's clearly out of bounds. But within the bounds that we've set, right, we'll try to create that environment where failure is accepted, but that failure then leads to a discussion. It leads to a movement forward, as opposed to just, well, we missed that one, let's get the next one. That kind of environment doesn't work. It has to be coupled with a process for engaging in conversation about it.
Yeah, you hear about those organizations, this hotel, hey, you can make any decision in favor of a guest up to $100 without any approval, or
right.
$1,000 or whatever,
right.
Whatever the number is right for their industry. And it's almost like the safety net of giving them that guidance of how much, where is the safe zone for experimentation? And
right.
And because it seems like, in my observation, I want to hear your thoughts on this. It seems like in the absence of clear parameters, nobody wants to skate near the edge.
No question.
Right? So let's err on the side of safety, and let's not even, let's leave all that unused potential experimentation out, because now I'm out into the risky zone because they don't know where the line is, right?
There's no question. I mean, this may sound silly, but about a week ago, for the first time I visited the Grand Canyon, and which it's just spectacular, But I went with my three of my brothers, and where we went, we didn't go to the typical tourist place where you go where there's all the guardrails and we went, and I'm forgetting the name of the exact location, but you drive for about 30 miles on this dirt road, longer than that, 40, 50 miles on this dirt road, and then the last 4 or 5 miles requires a high clearance vehicle, and so not just anybody can get out there. So we're out there, and we're out there all by ourselves, and we're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, and it's 3,000 feet, straight down, and in the absence of having those guardrails there, again, what I found myself doing was hugging the side of the rock that was furthest away from the edge, because it does something to you physically when you're looking over that edge. But in context of what you were just saying, Jess, I think absent having those guardrails there, we're gonna tend to hug the hug the side of the mountain so that we're not anywhere close to the edge, because in that situation, you get too close to that edge and 3,000 feet down, there's not much there that's gonna save you. And I think the same really is true as we think about leading and managing others. If we set those parameters, we set those guardrails and say, okay, again, clearly these are the bands within which we need to
regulatory,
operate.
Catastrophic loss.
Yeah,
reputation loss.
Exactly. I mean, and you're clear about what those are, and you're intentional about what those are, and those targets don't move. Yes, the regulatory environment can change, but thinking about our industry, the things that we would set as the guardrails, those aren't changing from day to day. So you're not changing the rules every day. But then you say, within those guardrails, we want to create that environment in which you're free to think, you're free to explore, you're free to fail. I think that's healthy.
Well, and think about the space of marketing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's part science, but it's also part art.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So can you give us a couple of examples of a couple of years that fell flat and then a couple that did great?
Well, yeah. I mean, without getting into too many specifics, there are certainly times when we roll out a marketing campaign or a marketing effort that we may think, hey, this is spot on. This is really going to do it, and we put it out there. And
you'll spend how much on it? Just give me a guess.
Oh, I mean, it can be as much as any particular campaign could be $300,000 to $750,000, depending on the nature of the program. And sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't work as well as we'd like them to. And what we've been able to do more recently is, we've set measurements in place so that along the way we can measure. So it's not. I mean, if you go back 20 years ago when I first started doing this, you sort of made the investment up front and you pushed it out there, and then a couple months later you found out whether it worked. And now, we can be much more precise, and we can measure it along the way, and we can make adjustments, which really helps. And so, frankly, that gives us also, I think, a little more leeway to fail. And I think we have to be clear how we define fail too. That it's not, failure isn't that always this catastrophic event. It's just that, hey, maybe it didn't do what we originally expected it to do, but now we have the ability to fail fast or to learn fast from our failures or from our successes. So now when we roll out campaigns, we can measure along the way and say, hey, this is really knocking it out of the park. So let's invest more, or we've got 3 or 4 different iterations of a message out there, and this one's clearly performing better than the other. So let's divert funds that we had put over here into this, because that's what's being successful. We can do that now, and to me that also allows us to have a little more flexibility in terms of our ability to be creative and to not always have to be so concerned about being so precise and so perfect out of the gate, because we can fail faster and we can learn faster from those failures.
Yeah. When you think about that growing process and the advantage of measurement, right?
Yeah.
But yet it's still humans that have to do the measuring.
That's right.
And have to recognize the pattern and make the decision.
Right.
We have listeners from dozens of different countries. They may not all understand just what a dominant position you guys have in the market here.
Yeah.
When you think about how you have done so well as far as owning the customer mind in these regions, can you talk more about what you attribute that to and
Sure. Yeah, I would mention a couple of things. We operate in a very competitive space, and we have been around in this market. We, meaning Zions Bank, has been around in this market, as I said, for about 145 years. But it really has been in about the last 20, maybe 30 years that Zions Bank has really elevated to a position of prominence. We had one of our major competitors, with whom we had competed for years. They were, again, about 20 years ago, they were acquired by a large national bank, and they had been one of the key community players in terms of, they sponsored all of the major events and things that were happening in the community. They were very actively engaged in the community. And when that acquisition took place, we made a very conscious decision to say, that's a position in the marketplace that we want to own. That is a piece that we want to carve out and say, that's who we are. Because we had been that. We had been a major contributor to the community for decades. But we said, we really want to own that space. And I would attribute much of the prominence of our brand positioning in the marketplace to that decision. One of the compliments I hear often is people will say, we see Zions Bank everywhere. Zions Bank is everywhere. Well, we can't literally be everywhere. And so when people say that to me, I get excited about it, because what it tells me is that we are where people expect us to be, or it's where they want us to be, or where it's important for us to be. And we work very hard at that, at trying to identify what are the important needs of the community. We recognize that at its heart, banking is very much a local business. Banking is very much a personal business. I mean, even today, with all of the technology and with all of the ways in which people can access their financial institution, banking at its heart is still a very local and a very personal business. And so I would attribute much of our brand success to that decision to become actively engaged in the community, and then be consistent with that over a number of years.
It's interesting, the value of consistency, huh?
Yes, in fact, we have a tagline that we say, we haven't forgotten who keeps us in business. And it's a tagline that we created, again, about 20 years ago. And we've stayed with it for 20 years. And we have discussion probably every year where we say, is it time to do something different with that? Well, there's something to be said for consistency, whether it's consistency in a brand or as a leader. There's something to be said for consistency in your behavior. Not only that your behavior is consistent over time, but that your behavior is consistent with what you say. There's something to be said for consistency, for sure.
Love it. I think it's a great place to end part one of the interview. Everybody, tune back in. We're going to hear some more from Rob in part two.
Hi, my name is Logan Wilkes, and I'm the CEO of Corporate Alliance. A few years ago, I moved to San Diego to build a new market for us there. The biggest deterrent I had to success was I didn't know a soul. I often thought to myself, if I just had a thriving network or influence, this would go 100 times faster. To be honest with you, I had never felt so alone in my life because A, I didn't have an influence, and B, I didn't know anyone that was going through the same thing that I was. If you have ever felt like this and you are looking to grow your influence, join us at one of our upcoming events. You can check us out at corporatealliance.net and request an invite to one of our upcoming experiences.